Good morning, friends. This is your teacher, Dr. Amit Bhattacharya, welcoming you to another session. We are discussing the poems of Philip Larkin, one of the most important poets of the post-Second World War period. Philip Larkin's poems have been selected for your study. In fact, there are 5 poems, of which we have already discussed once, the explosion, the Whitsun weddings. And today we are slated to discuss the poem At Grass. Now, At Grass is a poem that was published in Philip Larkin's 1955 volume, Less Deceived. At Grass means retired or enjoying retirement. You know, before I actually delve deep into the text, I must give you some idea of what the poem is all about. On one level, this poem is about 2 retired race horses. We all know that race horses are prime animals, but they are at the top of their form, say for 3 or 4 years of their life. After that, they are gradually retired from active horse racing. And, you know, through this allegory of the horses, Larkin actually deals with many things, many issues. In one sense, it may deal with human life. It may also dwell upon or be concerned with the national destiny of Great Britain. As we go along, I will obviously discuss these things and their ramifications. Now, At Grass is a very, very traditionally formal poem in some ways. If you look at the text, you will see that this is composed of 5 6-line stanzas. The rhyme scheme of each of the stanza is basically A, B, C, A, B, C. The first line rhymes with the 4th, the second with the 5th, and the third with the 6th. There is use of half rhymes. Usually, a very common and traditional English poetic feat of 2 syllables, you know, foot of 2 syllables, that is iambic. Foot is used with very, very rare variations. And, you know, usually the lines are iambic tetrameters, usually having 8 syllables to a line. But such is the poetic craftsmanship of Philip Larkin that he can circumvent the constriction that rhyme often actually imposes. How does he do it? By using certain figures of speech, by resorting to economical writing, you know, whereby he actually sometimes very suggestively uses synecdoche and simile. For example, parasol. in a way of synecdoche, stands for a member of the spectators, maybe a woman. Similarly, field glass and stopwatch also, by way of synecdoche, refer to men who use these instruments. Larkin's diction is very colloquial, down to earth. But Larkin also uses a very, very liberating device, that is enjambment. I have already talked about that in my discussion of the Whitsun weddings, for example. Run-on lines, run-on stanzas mean that despite the constriction of rhyme, Larkin actually can, if he so requires, go on with a particular train of thought beyond the constrictions of the stanza form. Now, we will start reading the poem. And before we do that, I will also refer to another figure of speech that Larkin often uses. Just as the main symbol of the poem is the horses, sometimes Larkin also uses pun by playing on words and what they mean. Main, M-A-N-E and M-A-I-N, main. They are used in a way. So we are going to read about that. So may I now request Shubhasri Bonik to read out, and I will stop her whenever I require the stoppage for interpretation.
The eye can hardly pick them out from the cold shade they shelter in, till wind distresses.
Wait a bit. The eye can, obviously, eye here also means the man who has those eyes. The eye can hardly pick them out. They're almost indistinguishable. Now here, the word them, this personal pronoun, actually refers to the horses who shelter in a cold shed. Again, cold shed, shelter. These words are associated with rest and repose, not with any hurried activity, to be sure. Yes. But this actually changes. This condition changes when wind distresses their tail and mane. Yes, read it.
Till wind distresses tail and mane, then one
what is the spelling? What is the spelling of mane?
M-A-N-E.
Yes. Go on.
Then one crops grass and moves about, the other seeming to look on, and stands anonymous again.
Wait. So the wind ruffles their tail and mane. In a way, the mental picture that is evoked is that of a ship in storm. The wind ruffles their tail and their mane. That is the main point. One crops grass. Okay. And another looks on. And then again they become anonymous. They become indistinguishable because, the wind stopped playing with their mane or tail. What is actually hinted at through this description is number one, distance, both spatial and temporal. And number two, their lack of distinction. There are only two horses. And they are anonymous. They have left their prime behind. They are anonymous. They are actually observed from a different distance, it seems. And that's why the distinguishing features of each cannot be discerned, cannot be noticed. Okay? So in a way, this anonymity, this forgetfulness, they have forgotten their glory days. And it seems that the observer has also forgotten their glory days. See, in all sides, in both sides, if I may request you to recall once, you remember there is a wish to be alone and the desire for oblivion. So they have forgotten, they want to forget, and then they also want others to forget. Okay. But then I will tell Shubhasree and Bikram that I will deal with stanzas 2 and 3 together. Now, let us read the second stanza.
Yet 15 years ago, perhaps 24 distances sufficed to fable them. Faint afternoons of cups and stakes and handicaps, whereby their names were artificed to inlay faded classic Junes. Sir, should I proceed?
No. Stop here. Now, actually, the poet speaker, the observer, is actually taking us back to a period distant temporally by 15 years. Now, 15 years ago, obviously the horses were not so anonymous. 15 years ago, they were very much famous. Why? Because they were race horses. Famous race horses. Successful race horses. They were known from a distance of, say 24 distances. Maybe the length of horse's body by, say, 24 lengths. So they were quite famous. They were quite distinct. They had each one of them an identity of sorts. And in cups and stakes and handicaps, various kinds of races in the flat racing season, a classic June, because June is the time when at Derby and Epsom, maybe famous races are run. And they won such races. Their names were not unknown then. They were famous. So I hope you have understood this much.
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, the fact is, it is often said that worldly fortune is very fickle. The vagaries of worldly fortune means that fame and fortune does not remain all the time. The thing is, how do you cope with your advancing years? Maybe your diminishing abilities and success. The horses, it seems, because they are horses, because they are not human beings, who always try to strive for more success, they have been able, it seems, to reconcile themselves with this phase of life. Let us go on and we'll see. Okay.
Silks at the start, against the sky, numbers and parasols, outside squadrons of empty cars, and heat and littered grass. Then the long cry, hanging unhushed till it subside, to stop press columns on the street.
Wait. Now, these horses have numbers, just as every athlete has a chest number. These horses were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Then, horse racing is very interesting for the British because it is a place for gambling. They can place bets on various horses, and if they win, they get a bonanza. If they lose, if the horse on whom one has betted loses, obviously they lose money as well. So the silk worn by the jockeys, the rider, the professional rider who rides horses during races, horse races. Now, and parasols I have already pointed out that by way of a synecdoche, it refers to the spectators, parasols. And the seals also refer to the jockeys. Okay. At the start and during the race, a horse could go forward or lag behind. A horse could win or lose, and so on and so forth. And the margin of that victory can be small or be or large or whatever. Ultimately, at the end of the horse race, there was excitement. There were spectators. There was excitement. And the cry unhushed can be the cry of simple admiration from the disinterested spectators who have not placed any bets. Disappointment for the losing gamblers in a way, and the betting men, and also of joy, elation for the winning persons. So the heat, both physical and figurative, the excitement, and also the hype, as well as the physical heat at ground level. And the littered grass, when horses actually trample grass, that grass is littered all over the place. And here at this juncture, the speaker very skillfully slips in a very, very suggestive word, squadron. Squadrons of empty cars. Those of you who have read Ode on a Grecian Urn by Keats, you may remember that Keats was talking about a heifer being laid to an altar by a priest and a procession. Now, it is also mentioned that they may have left behind some place, maybe a town, and that town will remain empty because they have been pictured in this particular manner. They've been pictured in this particular manner. They've been aged on the urn in this particular manner. Because the picture shows that these places have been emptied of the citizens who are now taking part in a procession, a religious procession. Similarly, these empty cars are empty because the occupants of those cars have gone in. They are enjoying their horse race. The squadron is very, very important because it is a military word. It refers to a particular formation in Air Force. Aircrafts are usually placed in squadrons. I will obviously have to come back to this particular suggestive word. Okay, so the squadrons are of empty cars are also very significant. And then the stock press columns are indicative of two things. Before the race, information related to the race was provided in racing papers. After the race, information about the winners and losers are provided again by the racing papers. In each case, what happens is, the horse race in which these horses may have taken part, they excited a lot of interest, generated a lot of interest. They were talked about, discussed, their strengths and weaknesses, their chance of winning a particular race. All these things were discussed, speculated upon. So they were, in a way, celebrities. But now they are indistinguishable. And in a way, they are not distinguished. And there is a very, very big contrast between the past glory and the present anonymity. As you can very easily understand. Now go on.
Do memories plague their ears like flies? They
Wait a
shake
bit.
their
Wait a bit.
heads.
Wait a bit. Beginning the fourth stanza. In a faint echo of Shakespeare, he points out that the speaker speculates. He asks this: do memories plague their ears like flies? Here, just look at it. It is a simile. Just as flies plague a horse's ears, memories of past glory, the speaker thinks, may at least disturb them. But as is the wont of interrogation, this particular figure of speech, a negative answer may be hinted at, because these horses are not human beings. They may be impervious to this change in their state. Glory, anonymity, nothing actually touches them. Go on.
They shake
After
their
five.
heads.
Yes.
Dusk brims the shadows.
Wait a
Summer
bit.
by summer.
Wait a bit. They shake their heads. This action may be, in a way, involuntary. It doesn't make any sense. It's just a chance motion from the part of the horses. At the same time, however, it may indicate a negative reaction, that the horses are not assailed by memory. This shake of head may be negative. They shake their head. Yes, go on. Again, after this.
They shake their heads. Dusk brims the shadows.
Yes.
Summer by summer.
Now, for the first time, we are given a hint at the time of narration. The physical time, dusk, and shadows. And surprise, surprise, this is also in a way linked to the advancing years of the horses. And the contrast is pointed out. There was sunlight, heat, that was indicated by the use of the word parasol, because we use umbrella either during rain or to ward off the heat and glitter of sunlight. We all know that. Now, just as the cold shade had given you a special cooling factor, the dusk also, the absence of sunlight after sunset, gives you a temporal cooling factor. Are you getting my point? So that this cold shade of the horses present is light years away from the racing grounds, race courses. Similarly, the daylight of the races is now replaced by the advancing, approaching darkness that the dusk prefigures. Yes, go on.
Summer by summer, all stole away, the starting gates, the crowds and cries, all but the unmolesting meadows.
Wait a bit. Summer by summer, as the horses grew older, their ability to perform diminished. Obviously, the starting gates, the spectators, the hype accompanying them, everything died out. Because there were new generations of horses who will take their place. Similar is the case with human life and the life of nations. At one time, one may be at the prime of his life, a nation may be at the height of its powers, her powers. But with the passage of time, we know conditions change. Similar is the case with the horses. What is left is the unmolesting meadows. That the horses have now been retired. They have been left to pasture in the unmolesting meadows. So here the use of this adjective unmolesting before the space that is meadows contrasts the nature of this place with the demanding race courses. The place at which the horses had once distinguished themselves is now contrasted with no question is asked, no demand is made of the once great but now retired and enfeebled horses are now left to pasture. Okay, go on.
Almanacked, their names leave they.
Almanac is an Arabic word that means, the lists of dates and the celestial happenings. What do we call Punjika, maybe. Their names are listed in chronicles, They are now physically forgotten, maybe, but their names still remain in the mind of men. Almanac, their names, go on.
Sir, almanacked, their names leave they.
Yes, go on, go on. Go
Have
on.
sleep their names
Wait a
and
bit.
stand at ease.
Wait a bit. Their names live. But physically, they have slipped their names. Just as a horse slips its halter, they have come out of the glory, the constrictions and the demands of that name. At one time, a particular person or horse may be very famous. like Balbinder Singh Sandhu in the Indian cricket team of 1983. Who got the very important wicket of Gordon Greenidge, or Joginder Sharma in the T20 World Cup of 2007, who was bowling the last over in the India-Pakistan match in the finals. But you will see, their fame is now no longer so great. If they actually go by you, if you meet them in the street, you will not know them. Because their fame has now diminished with the passage of time. But the person, even if the fame has another sphere, the person inhabits a particular sphere. They have slipped their names, and now they stand at ease. This ease, this repose, this ability to be comfortable with your changed circumstances is what gives contentment and brings stability in the life of a person, a community, or a nation. Go on.
Or gallop for what must be joy, and not a field glass.
So they can now stand at ease or gallop for what may be joy. So they are comfortable with their surroundings, with their temporal as well as spatial settings. And not a field glass. Observe them, notice them. So no interested spectator who may be interested in their performance now sees them, because they are not anymore participating in horse races. And no stopwatch actually measures the time in which they may traverse the distance. So human interest in these horses have now diminished. The selfish interest of human beings who saw in them only performers, that has diminished. I hope you understand what I mean.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so read this. No field glass.
And not a field glass sees them home.
Go on.
Or curious stopwatch prophecies. Only the grooms and the
No.
groom's boss.
No. Stop. So here again he uses synecdoche. Field glass means the person who uses field glass. Stopwatch, again, the person who uses stopwatch. Field glass is used, it's a kind of a binocular, It shows, it helps us see a particular horse, distinguish a particular horse from the others. The horse in which we are interested. Similarly, timing is also very important in horse race, because that will show you whether a particular record has been beaten or not, broken or not. So human interest in the horses has now diminished.
Only
The
the
rest of
grooms and the
yes,
groom's boy with bridles
with
in the evening
bridals,
come.
with
With
bridles in the
bridles
evening
in the evening
comes.
come.
Come. So they are visited only by their caretakers, the groom and the groom's boy, who take neither the halter nor the beat or other paraphernalia of horse racing, only the bridle. Because during the daytime, they pasture, they move about in the sun, getting out of the cold shade. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when dusk comes, they are taken back to their stalls, their stable, cold shade. Are you getting my point? So ultimately, care is taken of these horses by men who are staunch, who are not interested in their performance, but in their well-being. Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
So obviously, this is in a way indicative of the passage of human life as well. In our lives also, we have the preparatory stage, childhood, early youth, and then the prime of our lives when we perform. And after that, as we grow older, we actually lose the abilities that had once made us world beaters, maybe. But then ultimately, one has to accept the change of time. One has to accept the diminishing strength and ability and the enfeebling, ultimately killing march of time. We all know that. Ruin hath taught me thus to ruminate that time will come and take my love away. So it is the presence of our equanimity that ultimately decides whether we are going to be all right as we grow older or not. But on another level, this poem has been read as a post-imperial poem. We all know that at one time, this very small country was very, very powerful. The sun never set in the British Empire. But after the withdrawal of British troops and British power from the erstwhile colonies, the British Empire was a thing of the past. It meant a loss of prestige and power. Now, like many of his contemporaries, Philip Larkin was greatly affected by this loss in the national prestige and power. Just look at the use of the words and tropes. Horse, race horse, war horse. Horses are associated not with racing only. As cavalry mounts, they are also associated with military matters, with army operations. So at one time they were glorious, they were powerful. As instruments of imperialism. The same thing is hinted at by the squadrons of cars that are now empty. So the occupants of the car, each car, were engaged somewhere else. So in a way, this becomes a post-imperial poem in that the loss of the empire may be likened to the loss of the vitality and ability of these one-time glorious racehorses. They are only left with their unmolesting meadows, the meadows of England. And they are taken care of only by the staunch Englishmen, the groom and the groom's boy. By the reference to the boy, in a way, the poet speaker has the last laugh. If on one level, the unmolesting meadows and the care taken by the groom and the groom's boy may refer to the idea of the welfare state that was propounded after the Second World War in a big way by people like Clement Attlee and others. Then on the other hand, the reference to the boy, the next generation of caretakers, it can also refer to the possible continuance of this institution of care for the once mighty but now enfeebled upholders of the national prestige and power. With this, I come to the end of my analysis of the poem at Grass. If you have any queries, you may ask them.
Sir?
Go on.
Sir, basically, it is a lyric poem and it is about the horses' past glories and the present condition. 15 years ago, the horses are very much powerful and famous, but they are nothing to do with race now because they are retired and live in the meadows and wait for the groom's boy to come and to tend them. So, sir, on a critical view, sir, can we call the poem an elegy, hinting at the past glories and an emblem of lost?
Yes, obviously, any lyric with a sense of loss or a theme of nostalgia can very easily be called an elegy. If you remember a poem like The Ruin from the Anglo-Saxon lyric poems, you'll see that actually lyric mourns the passage of time, mourns the destruction, decay of a place, but if you read Goldsmith's poem, The Deserted Village, again, the decay of sweet Auburn is actually mourned in that poem. Now here, the fact that the horses have now reached the temporal dusk and also the figurative dusk of their lives, and the groom has come to take them to the cold shed, can also mean that the groom is the indicator, he is the representative or embodiment of death. But what ultimately gives the elegy the final note of affirmation? You will see in most cases, elegies have a glimmer of hope at the end. You think about In Memoriam. You think about Tennyson's poem, and you will see that ultimately old order changes, yielding place for the new. So that elegiac interpretation is not incorrect. Yes.
Sir, does the superannuated horses give us the glimpse of imperial loss, a kind of success and failure of the modern social democracy?
Number one, the question is wrong. It will be do the horses, not does the horses. Number two, that is what I have been telling you. The loss of the empire may be one of the motivating factors for the poem. Now the thing is, when we read a poem, when we interpret it from our perspective. The only thing that is required is to have cogency. Logically sound interpretation of any poem, even if it seems far-fetched at the first glance, may be perfectly sound, perfectly tenable. As I have pointed out, that these race horses, they are one-time glory and present in anonymity, may hint at the case of Great Britain, a small country, at one time, very powerful, the mother country of a vast empire, is now again a small country. It has lost its worldwide empire. But the fact is, even if you lose your glory, something changes. Something changes in your own attitude to yourself and also the attitude of others. Someone who has not achieved anything and someone who had achieved something and now again a nobody, our attitudes are different to these two classes of people. Any other question?
So we can see that the poem talks about the going away of the prime time of the horse's life, but sir, here the horses don't seem that they are quite bothered about the loss of their prime time, because the past memories of their glorious time don't bother their ears as flies do. But sir, here the Larkin persona seems more pessimistic about the loss of the prime time of the horses than the horses itself. Why is that? Is this because of the fact that the humans are more bothered about the loss of their youthfulness and than the horses? Or it is the horses cannot feel their state of the youthlessness? Or, sir, is it understandable?
Well, youthlessness is bad. You may talk about their old age or advancing years. Okay, what I am trying to, this is a good question. Why is it a good question? Because it posits a kind of a difference between the horses who do not have any cogent sense of the self and the observer human being, the Larkin persona, who very much has a sense of self. So in a way, it is possible and perfectly logical for the Larkin persona to be more concerned with the changed condition of these horses than the horses themselves. That is there. But in a way, you can very easily understand also that we learn from experience. We learn by observation. So in a way, it may also mean just as the Houyhnhnms had taught Gulliver the intrinsic value of rationality. Maybe these horses also have taught or may teach the Larkin persona and the readers, the human readers like ourselves, like us. The great lesson that the horses inculcate through their lives and through their attitudes. So I am not prepared to discard Larkin as being too pessimistic. There is always a silver lining of hope and affirmation. And this thing will be pointed out in a greater detail. When we read Church Going, even though he doesn't believe in the churches, he at least concedes that it is serious house on serious ground. So that is always there. And the same case was there in the explosion. Ultimately, the unbroken last egg indicated the continuation of life, despite the loss of particular lives, the lives of particular human beings. The show will go on, and the show must go on, and the show will go on. Any other question?
Sir, may I?
Come on.
Centering only the key themes of the inevitability.
I am not getting you. Repeat it.
Sir, is this poem at grass centering around the key themes of the inevitability of death and the insignificance of life?
Well, inevitability of death, of course, but not insignificance of life. Rather, the real meaning of life, the real meaning of contentment and fortitude. You know, it is man's capacity to evolve with time that makes human life worth living, both on an individual and on a collective level. So the insignificance of life is not something that Larkin is trying to point out in and through this poem. But so far as inevitability of death is concerned, there is a calm acceptance. Just as there is a calm acceptance of the passing away of the dearest phase of one's life, there is also a calm acceptance of the bridal of the groom at dusk. And I am reminded here of a poem tangentially. Tennyson's Crossing the Bar. Sunset, an evening star, and one clear call for me, and let there be no moaning of the bar as I put out to sea. Quoting from memory. So in a way, if there is sunset, if there is dusk, you may become aware of the approach of death, approach of night, approach of unconsciousness, the seizure of consciousness and life. But it doesn't mean that we are going to cry for the spilt milk. There is acceptance. And there is the fortitude that comes out of that acceptance. And yet, the nobility of spirit that leads man to go on. I hope I have satisfactorily answered your questions.
Yes, sir.
So if there are no other questions,
Thank you.
Shamim, you may remove me from the class. And the next day, that is from Monday, if everything is all right, I will discuss this thing. Charge going.
Okay, sir.